This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Today we're working on a Viking oven that is not heating well. It's just not lighting very well. So we're going to be replacing both of the igniters. So we opened up the door, pulled out the lower pan. I'm putting a little bit of oil on the threads of the two screws that go for each igniter. So this unit actually has two igniters. And that oil just helps to get those screws out. Sometimes they're a bit corroded or a bit tight. So I have my little 90-degree angle Phillips head screwdriver, and I'm going to just zip out these two screws that are holding in the igniter on the left. The one on the right you can also remove pretty easily, but the area to get your screwdriver in is more narrow. So for that one I'm going to use a small ratchet and a smaller Phillips head screwdriver. It's a little bit harder to get to. But once you put a little oil on here, these screws should come out pretty easily. And again, it's just two screws holding on the igniter. They're just Phillips head. And to get to the igniter, we just opened the door and pulled out that bottom panel. Should come out pretty easy. So it's important to have the power off. You can either unplug it or you can turn off the breaker for the stove and the oven. So we got the screws out, and now we're just going to be removing the door. Normally you can just pull up a couple of catches here near the hinge and you can pull the door straight off. This one, for some reason, the catches weren't letting go, so I had to remove a couple of Phillips head screws on the bottom panel in kind of an unconventional way. Usually, again, you can just remove the door, and then these two Phillips head screws that hold on the lower panel are easily accessible. But this one just wouldn't release, and that's okay. You can always work around these problems. So I just took a small ratchet and a Phillips head screwdriver and came at the two Phillips head screws kind of in between the lower panel and the bottom of the oven door. Actually, you can push up on the oven door a little bit, and I was able to get the two screws out. And then it hinges down, and we have access to the igniters. We've already loosened the igniters and to the wires. And the next part's pretty easy. We're just going to remove one igniter at a time. I'm going to remove the one on the right side, just disconnect the wires and pull it out. And then what I'm going to do is cut the wires off of the old one, and I'm going to use the nice little porcelain wire nuts that come with the kit to splice on these old wires onto the new igniter. That'll just make it really easy to plug the new igniter into position. So I'm going to remove about 1/4 inch of the insulation on the new igniter wires and on the old wires. When you hook these wires back up, there's no polarity problem, so it's not direct current, it's alternating current, so you can do it either way. But you do want to get the correct wires. If you remove both igniters at the same time, it can be confusing because then you have 4 wires from the oven that have to hook up to 4 wires, 2 for each igniter. A little confusing, so it's better to just do one igniter at a time. So I'm just going to hook those 2 wires to that igniter back up. Again, it doesn't matter which wires from the igniter hook up. You can do it either way. But you just got to make sure you're just dealing with 2 wires that are coming out of the oven. You don't want to will not have removed the second igniter yet. You're just doing one at a time. So I got those 2 hooked back up. I have power to the igniter. I'm just going to kind of push it back in loosely into the cavity. And then I'll go ahead and do the igniter on the left in the same manner. So I've got my connections all done, and now I'll disconnect the wires on the left igniter. I'll pull it out of the cavity, because we already undid the screws, and I'll remove these nice little spade modular wire connectors. Really easy to do. You can just pull them apart. Sometimes the wires are kind of held in with some clips, so you have to pull them out from the clips. And then when we get all done, we're going to just hide those wires back in the cavity, basically where they were, so they don't get pinched or they don't get overheated inside the cooking chamber of the oven. So we're going to try to kind of get them back where they were. So we're going to disconnect those two wires, and then we'll do the same procedure with this igniter. Just going to strip a 1/4 inch of wire from the new igniter and a 1/4 inch of wire from each of the old wires, and we'll use the porcelain wire nuts to get a really secure connection. When you do the wire nuts, you want to screw them on righty-tighty, as tight as they'll go, and that just ensures that the conducting part, the wires, are really locked together, and you'll get a lot of power going to the igniter. It won't be a bad connection. So we got that done. We're going to put that back into the cavity, and we're going to hook the wires back up. And then we just kind of tuck the wires back in where they were so they won't get pinched, they won't get overheated. And we'll close up everything. We're going to close up the lower panel by just hinging it back up, putting in the 2 Phillips head screws that hold it in position. And then we're going to test to make sure that both igniters are firing up nice and strong. If they're brand new, when you ask for heat, you'll notice that they start up at about the same time. They both start to glow, and then they both fire up and light the fuel at about the same time. So just pushing that back in. I'm going to close up the lower panel, and then we'll put those 2 Phillips head screws in again that hold it up. So again, normally you can remove the door pretty easily, and you can just get to these screws. In this case, the door wouldn't come off, so a little bit harder to get these screws in. You have to come in at an oblique angle. So we got that done, and now we're just going to mount these igniters back in with their 2 Phillips head screws. That part's pretty easy. These are really good ovens. They're very durable. They're more like commercial level. A lot of restaurants have these. You probably have these igniters last anywhere between 8 to 10 years. You can get the Viking igniters for your oven, or you can even use the generic Frigidaire ones. Work the same. They're really pretty much the same part. I think the Frigidaire ones are fairly cheap, easy to get. You can even get them on Amazon. So we're just tightening up those screws on the left igniter. These same generic igniters can work for Viking, Bosch, Whirlpool, Maytag, almost any kind of oven that uses a flat igniter. The GE ovens use a round igniter, so they're a little bit different. So we're just tightening up the one on the right. And we'll go ahead and turn on the oven, and then within about 30 seconds you should get a nice glow, and then you should get ignition. And if you're not getting that, then it's usually just a worn out igniter. It means you got to replace it. So these are getting nice and hot, and then the safety valve will let the gas flow in, and there's ignition. Yeah, that was nice. They both ignited at the same time. So we have a good, healthy oven. It'll have nice, even heat, bake things correctly, and you'll be able to get to your temperatures a lot faster because it'll heat evenly and quickly. I'm just going to put the bottom panel back in. Sometimes these bottom panels are a bit warped and a little harder to get in. If that's the case, you can just essentially stand on them to bend them back into a flat position, and then they'll go in easier. This one's pretty flat, but sometimes they get warped due to the heat. So I hope this was helpful to you and you get your oven working again. And thanks so much for watching our video, and please subscribe when you get a chance. Thanks again.